Hi everyone, my name is Dessa, aka Writing from the Shadows,
Hi, I'm Rika, aka Vestigial Claws.
and welcome to Work
Work in
in Progress.
progress.
If you watched the first episode and you're coming back, thank you so much. We're excited to really get into the meat of the story now that the exposition is kind of done and set up. And so for this week's episode, we read chapter 3, which is the wedding. So we are dressed as wedding guests.
Exactly.
All right. So that's all of my setup. Do you want to just jump into the chapter?
I am so down to jump right in.
Okay.
My dude Akutagawa Ryunosuke here will be helping me. I also will have the aid of things that I screen capped from this fic.
Okay.
Because there are a few lines that just landed very, very hard that I'm going to want to discuss here.
Okay.
But first, I made my standard list of talking points.
Okay.
I say standard, but we've only had one episode, so can anything really be considered standard? All right, so first thing to jump right into is not a question, actually, it's a comment. Your opening descriptions of Dazai were just excellent. Like,
thank you.
The way that you led into balancing his physical characteristics and what he's looking like and what he's presenting with why he is was very, very interesting. It very much furthers the fact that I believe there is pretty much nothing in this fic that is an oversight or unintentional. Which in turn has led to me I've just been writing down observations as I've been having them. But I open with that because it's such a deliberate way to guide a narrative. And it's such a deliberate way to give a reader a view into the world that you have. And I just really like it.
Thank you.
I just had to say that. Okay, so I think I'm gonna do a couple impressions of this chapter.
Okay.
Because I had some very strong reactions to this chapter. For those of you who are just listening, I have a little Akutagawa plushie with me. So you're missing the full effect of what I'm about to say here. I love Aku with my entire heart. And I was really curious to see what kind of role he was going to play in this story because his canon relationship to Dazai it leans so hard on their mafia days. So it was very interesting to see how that would translate. And so I think my first comment here is basically just, great to see this dude. Love him to pieces. Can't wait to see where else he goes because so many of the characters in this fic, when they're removed from their canon environments, they're a little bit different. So yeah, I love him. I'm glad he's here. I can't wait to see more of him.
And there will definitely be more of him because there's usually characters, maybe like one or two per fic where they kind of pop in for one scene and then they kind of fade out. But Aku is one of the characters that you will be seeing more of towards the middle and later half of the fic quite a bit. I played around with his backstory a lot because we're completely removing them from the Port Mafia. And so I think you will enjoy where he ends up going.
Enjoy can mean a lot of things when you're someone who writes very complex emotional fics and when you're talking to someone who distinctly enjoys messing up their favorite characters. So I am excited to see where he goes and also very scared for my boy. Mark me down as very, very scared for this dude right here. So, my first question that I have here is the first meeting of Dazai and Chuya. You're going very, very hard on just really emphasizing the differences between the two clans. What were some of the ways that you did this within not just the macrocosm of the two clans interacting, but in Dazai and Chuya's first meeting as well? Because there were a lot of things that I noticed, and I want to hear you talk about them.
Okay, let me just scroll down so that I have them. And just in general for their characterization throughout the story, the reason why I do really hit hard on the clans just having different backgrounds, different focuses and specializations is the fact that those then kind of get filtered through Dazai and Chuya. And so we see Chuya's obviously just been operating from a Nakahari Kai standpoint. Dazai has been coming from the Mitsushima Gumi. And so throughout the whole story, a lot of their strategic choices and a lot of their reactions to things are very much filtered through the lens of the clan that they're from. And one of the biggest things that I really wanted to hit home with Chuya in particular, because as always, I'm writing the Chuya is competent AF train. Toot toot. And
I mean, you're right. I'm on board with train wholeheartedly.
yeah. And so one of the really fun things that I think about the Nakahari Kai is the fact that they are the kind of espionage arm when we're looking at the strong points between the two clans. And that kind of shows in their first meeting in terms of how Chuya is just able to leave a lot of himself at the door and play a part for the duration of the wedding. And so that's something that also continues to come up in the story is the fact that Chuya is not only this great martial artist, and he has not only had experience as a advisor to Koyu?
Koyo.
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 Koyo. Koyo. So he's an advisor to Koyo. And so he has those skills, but he also has the ability to kind of change what he looks like, how he acts like, what he talks like. Whereas Dazai is coming from the Mitsushima Gumi, where they're used to just being able to use their vast numbers and kind of power through anything that's going on. They're huge in terms of the two clans. And so, yeah, you really see Dazai just being more strategic, more logistical, less emotional, as we usually see when it comes to a Sokoku fic. But yeah, those are the two ways the clans come into play.
So, follow up on that, because that's very, very interesting. You are kind of conducting the Chuya's incredibly competent train here. Is that what led you to decide to make Nakahara Kai the more espionage-focused and the smaller of the two clans? Because usually when I see people approach Sokoku as a dynamic, it's with Dazai being straight strategy and Chuya always being brute force. So it actually kind of surprised me to see where you went in this story with characterizing the clans and the nature of them, while still keeping that characterization, especially of Dazai being the slimiest bastard, especially keeping that intact. Was that a conscious choice?
Yeah, it was. So when it came to deciding what the two clans specialized in, really just as we talked about last episode with having to pick the players for the team, what I was looking for were a way to really make sure that the Nakahari Kai could be in a gridlock with Mori. And we know from canon, Mori is a scary and competent guy. He knows what he's doing. He usually has a large group of people at his fingertips. And so the Mitsushima Gumi is pretty much very, very similar to the Port Mafia. And so the question was, okay, well, if the Port Mafia has the soldiers and they have Dazai and Mori, why on earth is the Nakahara Kai able to be in a gridlock with that organization? And so information, intelligence gathering, they're different approaches to having control, but they both have their merits. And as we'll see throughout the story, information is power. And so that's why the Nakahara Kai is able to really stand out there. And then another thing that I want to mention is just in terms of Dazai and Chuya's positions in the respective organizations. If you listen to, I did a mini podcast about the structure of these two organizations. I don't know how long ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It's been a bit, but they are structured differently, which we will get into more as the fic goes on. But Chuya's position is that of the Gomen?
Yeah.
Yes. Woohoo. I remember I looked that up. Gomen, where he's an advisor under the senior advisor, Louisa. And so Chuya's position is honestly purely strategic. His job is not to be out there on the streets. His job is not out there to be out there fighting, which is a point of frustration that Chuya has expressed in the story because, you know, you have a powerhouse like Nakahara Chuya, why is he sitting at a desk? But that's where he's coming from, whereas Dazai is the lieutenant of the Mitsushima Gumi. which with the way that organization is structured, we have Mori at the top, we have the Seiko Komen leading the other Gomen, the advisors, and then you have Dazai as lieutenant or the Wakagashira, where his job is to control the port mafia and then answer to Mori. And so it's just a tree that keeps going down. So Dazai answers to Mori. There's a group of smaller league lieutenants who have like each regional area that answer to Dazai, and then they have people that are like local gang bosses that answer to them, and it all just trickles up to Mori at the top. But right below that is Dazai, so he has his fingers in everything.
So that's actually really interesting that you mentioned that, because you actually touch on it a little bit in this chapter with the sake ceremony, and specifically, like, it was just slipped in there. I think it was just one line about how Dazai was the one to drink second after Mori. But that line for me just held an awful lot of power. You did a lot of research for this fic into the cultural aspects and the yakuza structure and traditions specifically. I'm going to make you talk more about that as the story progresses. But how did you find that researching those things influenced some of your characterization and some of your choices in how the characters behaved, specifically knowing the structure of certain yakuza groups and how they function? Because it is different than the port mafia. The port mafia is not based on a yakuza structure.
Well, mostly when I was I just came across so many interesting articles. It was a really fun research period in terms of learning about all the different ceremonies. For a little bit, I was very frustrated because I could not find like one source that agreed on like a structure for the yakuza, which is why I have two different structures in this story.
That's understandable given how secretive the
Yeah, it's fair. It didn't help me, but I got it. And then just in terms of the research culturally, as I mentioned last time, I really wanted this to feel like, it's very much steeped in Japanese culture, because that's what the yakuza is. And so when it came to writing the story, just wherever I could really make sure that I was including the culture and including those different aspects of research, I put it in there. And there's just so many intricacies when it comes to being a member of the yakuza and knowing how the structure works and knowing where your place is and where someone else's place is, that Dazai and Chuya know. And they know more than the average reader, which is a position I really like writing from, where they're kind of sprinkling and teaching lessons here and there because they already know. And I don't know if that answered your question.
It, in some ways it kind of did. I think that that's also a question that I'm going to wind up touching on more the more I read, because especially with your answer, knowing that you did sprinkle it in throughout and that it was very, very much intentional, there's going to be more of that that's going to come up. I'm actually someone who does not know a lot about the structure of the yakuza, so this is also very interesting for me, because I'm learning something. Yeah. I'm getting to learn a lot, and it's an interesting way to convey information through two narrators. And at least one of them, Dazai, is incredibly unreliable. Just as a narrator and as a character, I think that nearly everyone who's ever written Dazai, who has ever explored his character, pretty much everyone can agree on the fact that Dazai is a very unreliable narrator.
I'm going to give you a caveat for that.
Oh?
And that caveat is this fic.
Oh!
And this is one of the things that I mentioned last time, why it's really interesting for you to read this, having never read any of my other Zokoku fics, because I actually characterized more through Chuya's POV than through Dazai's POV. So the fic is very heavily Chuya's POV. I think when I crunched the numbers, I'm going to say it was like 70-80% Chuya POV.
I love that you crunched the numbers. That makes me really happy.
I'm glad that makes you happy. And the reason is because Dazai's the most reliable narration of himself in most of my stories. But we also like him like knowing everything and us not knowing it, so that's why you don't get a lot of his POV, because Dazai has all the answers, and I don't want the readers to have all the answers.
That makes a lot of sense. That's honestly the best reason that I can ever think of for writing primarily not in Dazai's point of view. That was actually something that I was probably going to ask about at some point, because Dazai in canon is very much presented as I call him Das Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Basically just always having that answer, always having the thing to pull out at the last minute, always being a step ahead of both the other characters and the audience. As a reader, for me, that can actually be kind of frustrating. Sometimes when you can't see the link work that a character's doing, when you can't see their thought process too much, and when they as a narrator are not really disclosing, it can be hard to make those connections. Somehow in this story, I'm not experiencing that frustration.
And I think because when we look at canon and we look at how Dazai is written in the canon verse, the story is primarily told through not Dazai's POV. And one thing that I think a lot of people have a hard time with when it comes to writing Dazai is, how do I write a character that intelligent? He's a veritable genius. He can strategize like nobody's business. Like, how do you capture that? And the way that I found through writing for the series, I want to say like 3.5 years now, maybe going on 4, is that just leaving his POV alone and letting everyone else go, Dazai knows something. There's something going on there. And being able to pick that up and seeing like they're able to like kind of piece together Dazai's thought process. But it's also a question of like, is that a reliable map? Is our narrator able to interpret Dazai correctly? So that's a little bit of a question. And that's where I kind of get the mystique of Dazai in canon and stick it in my fic.
And I've already started noticing a lot of that. With, in fact, with the first meeting of Dazai and Chuya, the entire sequence of them sizing each other up and poking, evaluating, reevaluating, poking a little bit more, that was so interesting to me. I really enjoy that you kept a lot of their banter. How did you work the banter in without the character history? So much of Sokoku's banter in canon is based on the fact that they've known each other since they were shitty 15-year-olds. Yeah. But like having them come in and be like, all right, I just met you, and then having that banter and that level, it was really interesting because instead of using it as a device to say these characters are established, they know each other, they have this repertoire, you almost used it, at least in my view as a reader, to kind of establish that this is how they're testing each other. So instead of it being they know each other and so that's why they're comfortable enough to do this, it's these characters are incredibly uncomfortable, and so they're doing this banter to basically provoke reactions and to see what each other, like to see what they're doing. Given what Dazai is and how his mind works and how he is usually a step ahead, where would you put Chuya in matching that?
I would put Chuya pretty close to Dazai's level. I would consider them equals in the story, just with different skill sets. Because that's something that I really enjoy about Sokoku when I'm reading it. In other fics or when I'm looking at it in canon, is I like the fact that it's a partnership. And obviously there are times when that's a little skewed in canon. And there are just times where, because Dazai is just that smart, it's hard to write them as equal partners. But there's a couple things I did really to put Chuya on a level playing field with Dazai in the story. And the first was the fact that Goyo didn't let Chuya be in the talks. So the first time Chuya's meeting Dazai is the first time Dazai's meeting Chuya. And so Chuya has that secondhand interpretation from Goyo's perspective, which I think we can both agree is going to be pretty perceptive, whereas Dazai's just walking in cold. And so, I kind of put Dazai a couple feet behind Chuya there. And then the other thing is the reason why the Nakahara-kai is the Nakahara-kai, and that's because Chuya was born and bred for this. So whereas Dazai, we get into his backstory as the fic goes on, but he was not born into the yakuza.
That's interesting that you say that. There's a line that you have in this about how Dazai's reputation is basically of this like monster who was born and bred and was absolutely made to be a yakuza leader. So it's interesting to hear that take, that Dazai's reputation isn't necessarily accurate.
Yeah, well, just in canon, most people don't know where he came from. So when you don't know, you kind of fill it in. And when he's that confident, you're like, oh yeah, this guy was made for this lifestyle. That's it. Whereas Chuya was literally just from the time he was able to talk, this is what he did. And so that's kind of where their competence levels level out.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's an interesting way to handle not dumbing Dazai down while still not making it a completely one-sided Dazai sweep of this dynamic. I think it's very interesting that you kind of thought ahead to what you would need to do to handicap Dazai to get them on a level playing field at first meeting.
Yeah.
So, there's another question that I have.
Okay.
So, as you've said, you've done... We're checking time?
Yes, go
Got
ahead.
5 minutes. So, as you've said, you've done a lot of that cultural research, not only into the yakuza, but also into a lot of elements of Japanese culture. Which means that you know that the use of honorifics is generally pretty important in speech.
Yeah.
And this isn't something, you don't drop honorifics for every character in this fic. This is not an instance of, you're not a forgetful writer, you forget to do it. Dazai does not use honorifics in this fic that I've really seen. Not about Mori, not to Chuya, not to or about Koyo. Why?
Well, the first thing I want to answer is just the fact that anyone that read my author's commentary has heard this over and over again, is that I'm very particular with the story and how people address each other. So there will be times where someone has been addressing a character this way the whole time, and they'll just change for this one time, and that has a meaning. And so you're right in the sense of, like, when there's not honorifics, it's for a reason. And I have an answer for the why Dazai uses it, but I kind of want you to, like, experience it as the story goes on, because I'm trying to think what chapter it is. Towards middle to back half of the story.
Oh, I pulled on a thread here.
When we really start, it has to do with his backstory. So when we really start getting into the backstory, it'll kind of answer itself.
All right. I'm interested, and also I'm kind of delighted that I pulled on that thread really early, because it was just like, it's so unusual to have a character in a fic where you're using honorifics, and especially in Japanese culture and then in the yakuza structure, both of which are very based on respect. To have a character like Dazai, who's a high-ranking member who is just very flippant about that, is very culturally atypical. So I'm really interested to see where that goes and what that has to say. I feel like you've been, like, even in these first 3 chapters, I feel like you've just been leaving breadcrumbs. And I'm really, really excited to read more, so that way those breadcrumbs can come back. And I can be like, I remember that from chapter 3. I remember that. So, let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay, so my next question-y, comment-y, discussion-y point is that obviously the overarching theme of this fic is loyalty. It's in the title. But you had, and I'm going to pull my fic receipts here, because this was just a very clever exchange, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I want you to talk about it a little bit. Let's see. I have to find it first. Let's see. I have to find it. Maybe I didn't save the one passage, but I was like, oh.
Do you know what it was about? Because I have it open.
Yeah, it was about, it was the one where they were talking about their loyalty and how Chuya specifically has no ties to Dazai's clan and now is fairly separate from his own. The question of where does Chuya's loyalty lie? That seems to be a very big overarching thing.
Yeah.
But I'm also sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I'm also, like, in the context of this passage, it was very much framed for Chuya. I'm interested in where Dazai's loyalties lie. I'm interested in why he is where he is, because in establishing the clans as Nakahara Kai being very family-based, being very built on loyalty and deep, deep ties, you've established the opposite with Dazai and Mori. So I'm interested to see where his loyalties are and how they change for the story.
And so just in terms of the passage, I'm going to guess, because this is actually highlighted in my author's commentary, is...
I'm doing real well here picking out all
You are, and because I think part of it is because you write with me so often. But the passage of, what does it matter, I'm not part of the Nakahara Kai anymore. Dazai says, you have no loyalty to the Mitsushima Gumi. And Chuya says, I have loyalty to you, husband. Dazai's teeth bare in a dangerous grin, one that matches the sharp glint in his gaze. A title and a pair of signatures means nothing compared to a lifetime of allegiance, much less blood loyalty. I'm not going to tell you where Dazai's loyalties lie. I'm not letting you get all of Dazai's backstory right now. Everyone else had to wait like 16 chapters.
I had to shoot my shot, Dessa. I had to shoot my shot.
But in terms of author's commentary, one thing that's really fun, and one thing I'll show you when we're done reading the fic, is I actually have a character page at the back where I go through everyone's backstory, and then there's a line that says where their loyalties lie, and it lists who they're most loyal to. I will tell you that Dazai is committed to the Mitsushima Gumi.
Okay, that's interesting that you say Dazai's committed to them. That was a very deliberate choice of words, and I'm taking that very heartily to imply that Dazai, his loyalty might be to his clan, but it's not necessarily to their current leader. I'm very suspicious of Mori. For this entire chapter, I've been very suspicious of Mori. There's part of this is I am coming in here with a little bit of inside knowledge of what usually happens to Mori when you're writing Mori, because we've discussed this.
Yeah, and for anyone who had read my stories before, I killed him off every other time before this. So this is the most screen time Mori's had in one of my stories, actually. He usually doesn't get this many lines in.
Oh my gosh. I am waiting, first of all, for Mori's inevitable demise, but second of all, I'm very interested to see what will turn Dazai's loyalty there. If it doesn't lay with Mori, but it does lay with the clan, I'm making a prediction here. In that's going to be something that's going to be a big divide for Dazai, of being able to say, I am still loyal to my organization, but I'm not loyal to its head, would require Mori to do something that would either be directly aggressive to Dazai and something that he values over his loyalty to his clan, or something that would very directly jeopardize the organization. And I don't know which it is. So it's sending me. I'm trying to figure this out. So
one thing I also did want to say in terms of you getting this very slimy sense from Mori is because I've never written Mori very much in a chapter fic before this story, I really did want Mori to come across as suitably terrifying and unsettling.
You succeeded.
Thank you.
I was uncomfortable.
Good.
Happily. I feel like if you're not mildly uncomfortable or disgusted every time Mori is on screen, then someone hasn't done their job with Mori.
That's fair.
There's nothing about my character that isn't slimy. I say this as someone who appreciates him as a character. He's very slimy.
Yes.
I do like... I'm just gonna say, so this is very obviously a thing that I don't really appreciate in canon, the Mori and Elise thing. I'm happy to see that you didn't lean into that at all. I'm really happy. Like, I didn't think that you would, but it just makes me happy to see fan content that's able to characterize him as creepy, very predatory. Like, your Mori very much is incredibly predatory. I can already tell. But without relying on, like, the overwhelming shock value of what canon does to establish that. Is that something that, in characterizing someone like that, what do you do to really get that across without doing what Asakiri did and just straight up going that route?
Um, I think it's about the subtleties, really, especially with a character like Mori he's not someone that's outwardly like flexing his power and that sort of thing. He's just there to make you just feel vaguely unsettled about him. Like there's a little bit of like a creepy pasta there. You're like, I don't know what's going on, but it's not right. And it's really about the little details. And so with this chapter in particular, the fact that he didn't show up to the ceremony, but he was at the reception. That's weird. And you're like, why was he not there? So that kind of like sticks out to you. But then the fact that he shows up to the reception and is immediately talking to Chuya. It's also weird. You're like, what is he doing? And then also the fact that when Goyo bowed to Chuya, Mori zeroed in on that. And so there's just a couple of places where every time you're writing this character, you just kind of want to twinge it a little bit and just write something that's not quite comfortable and not quite right. And then they just stack up on each other and you get to the overall ending impression of like, that guy is weird and scary and I don't want anything to do with him.
It honestly, it creeps me out a lot more than Canon Mori does. Just because leaning so much into the pedophile aspect of it is so heavy-handed. It's just such a blatant, this is a bad guy. Whereas I think that you've kind of taken Mori from someone who in canon to me reads a lot like a caricature of a villain to someone who is genuinely unsettling and genuinely creepy. Like there's a reason why I'm zeroed in on Mori, and there's a reason why my notes literally say Mori is sus. And it's just because you have this lingering sense of unease around him, but it's subtle enough that you can buy that this guy is the head of an organization.
Yeah.
Like it's very difficult for me to buy in fiction when characters are very blatant about terrible things like that. It just doesn't make sense to me to establish a character like that and then to establish that somehow, despite the fact that this character is so blatantly disgusting and so blatantly disregarding of everyone, that he has loyalty.
Yeah,
we're getting
that
back
people
into
are like willing to follow after him.
And it's interesting that you got the subtlety of, there was one line in there about, is Dazai afraid of Mori? And correct me if I'm wrong. I loved that line, and I also loved how evasive Dazai was in regards to that question. Like it seems like Chi is having some of the same questions that I do about Dazai. Like, who is this guy? Why is he loyal to this organization? Chuya's loyalty is very easy right now to figure out. And Dazai's is perplexing.
Yeah.
But even then, you've written Mori in a way that I can see why this man inspires loyalty. So it's not a reach that Dazai is where he is and is comfortable there.
And that's, you asked last week if there was a reason why the Mitsushima Gumi, why Mori was ahead of it without like having the family name. And the reason why was kind of to establish Mori's competency in the sense of, whereas the Nakahara Kai has really been just a blood-based hierarchy up until Goyu came. The Mitsushima Gumi at this point is a meritocracy. And so Mori is in charge because Mori was the best guy for the job. And it has nothing to do with his familial connections. It has nothing to do with the history of the Mitsushima Gumi. He's just number one.
That is really, really interesting. I'm actually really interested to see, in fact, how that's going to come into play when the conflict comes out. Because I think that when you structure two organizations like this, with one being very, very family-based and very much you're kind of born into your position more or less, everything is very strongly based on blood loyalty. And then to have an organization that's its absolute antithesis, that doesn't value that at all, but values competency and being able to get to the top of that. Here's a question.
Okay.
In not necessarily like an all-out face-to-face conflict, but
Mm.
in a conflict where both groups could lean into their strengths, who do you think would win?
Um, it's hard to say because I really did kind of go out of my way to make them dead even. And that's, the fact that they're dead even is how the entire plot comes together, in the sense that they're like, well, we can't take each other out, but together we can take out this other mystery group. And because it really is, I really did stack the deck on both sides, because you have Mori and Dazai strategically on one hand, but you also have Luisa on the other. So, it's
Little
kind
Louisa
of...
May Alcott.
Yeah,
doing her
Luisa's
best.
holding it down by herself in terms of the strategist. Like, you have the sheer numbers on the Mitsushima Gumis, but you have Chuya on the other hand.
You have an entire Chuya.
Yeah, so it's like, even though the Nakahara Kai is smaller, they just have more specialized individuals, whereas the Mitsushima Gumi has more grunts. And so it really, in my opinion, would come down to who takes the first shot. Because I think the person that pulls the trigger first is likely to win.
Interesting. Talk to me about how Chuya is currently feeling as of chapter 3, basically completely cut off from his clan, knowing that essentially he was he was given to the enemy in order to further an alliance, but he was like, you've set up this arranged marriage that is essentially also kind of, you're putting Chuya in a very vulnerable position. And you've established Chuya as Chuya.
Yeah.
And, no Chuya is going to take well to being in a position like that. And especially leaning into how closely he is tied to not only the Nakahara Kai in general, but Koyo in specific, and how guarded he is of that relationship. What is he feeling right now? Just having to the symbolic destruction of his contact number for Tachihara, and the fact that was essentially his last tie to Nakahara Kai. That isolation is obviously what you're going for here, and how is Chuya dealing with it?
It's not an easy position to be in. It really isn't, but just like how I view Chuya in canon, this is a Chuya that's just bound to his duty, and he's loyal to his people to the absolute last. And so if he has to be the sacrificial pawn for them to survive, Chuya's gonna suck it up and do it. And so that's really where he's coming from at this point. If you're just listening to the audio and you hear that clicking, our dog is walking around. But yeah, he's not comfortable, obviously. We saw the hesitation in the sake ceremony in terms of him acting like he has it all together, but not really having it all together. But he's also confident in his own competence. So he's coming in with pretty much no cards in his hand, but she is if I know anything, I know how to survive and how to manage myself. I'm sorry I look so distracted. The dog is
She's
in the wrong spots. Okay. Hey, Gracie, can you get out from back there? Thank you.
Can you not? If you're just listening, we're trying to maneuver a big-ass German Shepherd, a lighting setup.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break.
Quick dog break.
Yes, this out of the way because there's a candle by her. Okay, we're back.
And we're back.
But I actually think I got through everything I wanted to say in terms of whatever we were just talking about.
Chuya and his
Chuya,
isolation.
how he's feeling, yes. And we'll get a lot more of it as we get into kind of his stay with the Mitsushima Gumi, because as I mentioned earlier, most of this fic is through his POV, so you get a lot of his feelings. But right now he's just kind of trying to feel his way through. He's never met Dazai before, so he's trying to kind of get a sense for what kind of marriage is this going to be. He's completely cut off from his job at the Nakahara Kai, so he's trying to get a sense of, are they going to put me to use, or am I just supposed to be a house husband, and that sort of thing.
Chuya. I'm sorry, what's the funniest mental image? Just give him a nice little apron.
Yeah.
Can he cook?
He can cook.
Oh. Well, then he can absolutely be a perfect house husband. He can cook. He can make some tea.
Well, the question is, will he cook for Dessa?
I hope not. Their banter makes me very, very happy. I am excited to see it likely continue through this entire story because I can't imagine Sokoku not bantering with each other.
I cannot write a Sokoku fic without banter. That's the number one. I'm like, how's the fastest way I can get to the banter?
Honestly, same. And I've only ever published one Sokoku fic, and it's smut. But it's smut and then like 50% banter.
As it should be.
Because like, you just can't write those two if you're not antagonizing each other. Which is an interesting thing because in most relationships, you know, you build up. You meet each other, you get the initial awkwardsies out of the way, you build on it. Like, even if it's more of an arranged thing, usually there's some build. What's it like writing a relationship from the top down? We start at marriage, we start at commitment, we start at, I don't know you, but now I'm kind of legally obligated to die for you. What's it like starting from there as your development point?
Well, the thing is because this is a political marriage, both parties are kind of walking into it with no expectations. So they're married on paper, they're living in the same apartment, but they're not married in the sense that most people would think about it in having a life partner and someone, to have and hold sickness and wealth, all that, whatever the lines are.
I haven't been married. I don't know.
Sickness and health, the rich for the poor. I don't know what order they're in. But so they're married on paper, but they're both very much aware of like, we're married so that this alliance has a focal point. So it's not necessarily that I'm building it from the top down. It's so much as I'm thrusting them into relationship quarters and going, now kiss.
I mean, isn't that what we all want to do with our ships? It's just being like, all right, you're married now.
Yeah,
you got a deal.
Even though Chuya and Dazai are married at this point, like, neither of them will die for the other. That's just, they don't care about the other that much, like, in terms of keeping them alive. Like, Dazai has a reason to not let Chuya die, because if Chuya dies in his care, that's war, essentially. And Chuya can't really murder the lieutenant of the other organization while living in their building. Like,
I really
he could, but it wouldn't be the smartest move. I enjoyed the passage where Chuya was just very strongly considering it, and it was like, no, it's not going to end well for me. Yeah. But he's still considering punting Dazai out that window, which is excellent. That's one thing I like when I do write Sokoku fics, where they're kind of in the situation where Chuya can't be outwardly violent to Dazai, is I still want to like put it in there that he's thinking about it. he's really strongly considering it. Which kind of makes sense. I mean, in just about any universe you put these two into, and this fic very much proves it, their personalities are going to clash on some level. Yeah. They can also be obviously a very formidable team, and when they get to that point, they can read each other very well, but the initial clash is so strong. And I'm very interested to see how they work past that again. I know that I mentioned that in this in our first episode here, but the little bits that we get to see of them right now is just very much in, like you were saying, the marriage as it's a political marriage. It's basically a business arrangement. It's saying our groups have an agreement and it's currently in married documentation. Yeah. But there's still no fondness there. No. And I know we have a lot of fic to get through. We do. It's a long fic. But Dazai's really not done anything to endear himself to Chuya yet. He has not. Can you name, as of chapter 3, can you give me one positive Dazai trait? I would say it's good on him for, like, leaving the wedding early. because like it was an uncomfortable wedding.
It was.
They have like this no man's land in between the two clans that have been like at blood war with each other for generations, and they're all just sitting at dinner tables going, wow, I want to kill that guy right over there, but I can't because my boss is sitting here glaring at me, and now we have a truce. And so up and leaving early was pretty good because Chuya did not want to be there at all. He did not like being like married off in the eyes of the clan. It's a punch to the gut to go from like the heir of this clan to being married off like cattle. And whether or not Dazai cared about Chuya's feelings in that moment, he definitely knew that Chuya did not want to be there. So he's like, we are leaving. So good for that. Also, he gave Chuya his own room.
That's true. I appreciated that. I was kind of wondering about that. I was like, is this gonna lead in? Is this gonna be like a
bed?
Yeah? I was like, is this gonna be a there's only one bed scenario? Or are we gonna have the good fun times of? Actually, no one in Sokoku would be like, oh no, you take the bed, it's fine. The ship would be like, bastard, get out of the fucking bed.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping here.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Mm-hmm.
She is just gonna go to sleep on the ceiling. Which actually leads me into another question. We've touched on the fact that this is a universe where abilities exist.
Mm-hmm.
We've also touched on the fact that, as of the end of Chapter 3, Chuya's ability is, first of all, cataclysmic, and second of all, something that he does not have very good control over. Are they parallel to their canon abilities?
Yes, they have the same abilities as they do in canon.
Okay, so my follow-up there is, if they have the same abilities that they've had in canon, is this why Chuya's been stuck behind a desk for this entire time? Because his ability is so volatile, and because unleashing him is unleashing havoc? Okay. Okay, cool. I got a concession.
Yeah.
So, I have one more kind of off the top of my head question here, and it circles back to, again, a lot of your cultural research and a lot of the detail you're putting in there. Chuya is currently in a position where... I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. He's essentially had his honor stripped from him. Is that going to come into play later in the fic? The fact that Chuya, who went from being born into being the heir to his clan, was essentially married off like cattle, and now is in this position where he has no honor. Because he was married into this other clan, he doesn't even necessarily have his family name anymore. Like, he doesn't have any of that connection and anything to tie him to what in canon and from what I've observed in his fic, he values so strongly.
There will be a lot touched on in terms of that arc for Chuya, in terms of losing the position of power. It's something that's very personal to him, something that's a very big part of his life, so it definitely comes up more than once, and it's kind of a through arc in the story. I will, however, say that his honor has not been completely stripped from him for two reasons. One is Goyo bowing to him. The boss of the clan bows to no one. And so when she did that, she did it specifically to give him some negotiating power. She said, I'm bowing to you in front of Mori and in front of the other organization, in front of our clan, to confirm that even though you are married off, I still respect you. So he has that kind of still in his back pocket, and then he still has his family name. He did not take Dazai's name.
Okay. I was gonna follow up ask
Yeah.
about that because it wasn't. That's really interesting. But it's also kind of sad to me. We're leaving chapter 3 with basically Chuya having nothing but his name and a little shred of honor left to him, and he doesn't know, like where we are right now in the story. He doesn't know what kind of man he's married to. He doesn't know what kind of life is in store for him. He really has nothing. Like, he has no support system. He has absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to know that something that's going to help get him through this, and that's probably going to guide a lot of him, is the fact that he has his honor and he has his name.
Yeah, he still has a reputation to live up to.
question there.
Okay.
Chuya's been riding a desk for a while. Dazai knows about his ability, but we all know about what Dazai's intel gathering skills are. Is it common knowledge of what Chuya's ability is?
It is not.
Okay. How good is Dazai's espionage to know that? God, that man is way too well informed.
Yeah, well, so there is a certain aspect of Chuya because he has been riding a desk for several years, but before that he was the heir apparent. And so up until essentially the time he disappeared from the streets and was doing his desk work, people were gathering intel on this as the future head of this organization. So there's going to be information that Dazai has from when Chuya was younger, that he can kind of pull from and take threads from and put a picture together. But there's obviously the circumstances surrounding Chuya losing his title to the clan, as well as what he's been doing recently. A lot of the details are things that are not common knowledge.
So currently where we stand, Dazai and Chuya are on equal playing fields of knowing so little about each other and so much about each other's reputations. So going forward, I am very interested to see more of the clash of reputation versus actually experiencing each other. So now I guess my only question is, do you have any questions for me as a reader who is consuming the hell out of and really enjoying this fic?
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm going to ask you every episode for the Rika Watch to know what you're looking for. Yeah. Rika Watch 2K20.
Oh, yeah. By the way, Happy New Year, everyone. Yeah. 2020 vision. Okay, Rika Watch 2020 is, first of all, what's Mori's deal? Why is this dude so sus? How is he gonna die? And what part is it gonna play in bringing Chuya and Dazai closer to each other? Let's see. Rika Watch number 2. I want to see what kind of husband Dazai is gonna be. Like, I can basically work out how Chuya would interact with a partner, be it in a, like, okay, this is gonna be just business, or a, okay, we're actually gonna try to get along and be friendly. Chuya's reactions are a lot easier to gauge. I really want to know how Dazai's going to approach this. 3, and this is a just completely indulgent Rika Watch here. How hot is their first time gonna be, and what are the freaking circumstances? Because right now, neither of these characters want to get in bed with the other one. I love to see how we get from point A to point no one's wearing clothes and choose on the
I will say, just for a little teaser on that part, after I posted the chapter where that happened, I got a lot of what? Which is very amusing because the chapter after it very much clarified it, but I did leave everyone kind of on a like a scratching head like,
You're gonna leave me on a cliffhanger with a smut chapter, aren't you? We're gonna have to wait a week for me to get to past the what. Oh man.
They had to wait like probably a month.
Oh, rest in pieces everyone live reading this fic. I have one up on y'all, given that I didn't live read it.
Yeah.
And that I don't have to be driving myself crazy for months at a time waiting for an update.
Yeah, I've said many times before that I could not read my own chapter fics because I'm like, because I know how they end and I put the angst with a happy ending tag on there, but there are some chapters where I'm like, ooh, if I didn't know what the next chapter was, I don't know I could handle this.
That's fair. I feel like you should kind of always, if you're writing anything angst, you should always aspire to write a fic that you're not sure you would be able to get through. At least that's how I approach my own angst. Yeah. I'm like, what's gonna really wreck me? So let's see. Rika Watch number 4? Yeah, we're on 4. Let's see. Is Chuya gonna press the panic button? The Tashihara panic button? there's nearly nothing that knowing Canon Chuya and knowing what we've established of your Chuya, he wouldn't do that lightly, but also he's so capable and he's so confident that I don't know if he would ever really have a reason to. So I'm interested to see if Chuya goes for a panic button, and if he does, why.
Okay, and then on to Rika Watch number 5.
Rika Watch number 5, and this is a big one. I want to see how the abilities come into play within the Yakuza structure. The Port Mafia, again, not the Yakuza.
Right.
Not following the rules of the Yakuza, not following the cultural context or impact of the Yakuza. But because this is a universe where they have abilities, but also they're operating within essentially a real-world organization, I want to see how that changes the landscape of what is likely to be a very interesting gang war.
Yeah.
That's like my main one. Really, my main one is just, I love to see how the abilities interact in a world where the power structures are so different. Because, like in Bungo Stray Dogs canon, ability users and their roles, they kind of take a societal backseat. Like, despite somehow causing that much mass chaos, it's not a widely known thing, and it's more of a shadow organization thing.
Yeah.
So bringing it more into, I hesitate to call the Yakuza a cultural institution, but
I think it kind of is. Not as much present day, but I think it certainly was.
It was, and in this universe that you're writing, obviously it still is.
Yeah, so in this universe, the Yakuza is very much an open secret. So you walk in a lobby and you see a guy with like tattoos peeking over his collar, you're like, oh, I know who that is. I'm going to avoid all interaction with the mafia because I don't want to die. And that's kind of where the verse is sitting. People know that there's Yakuza clans. The government obviously knows that the Yakuza is operating, but they're just so ingrained and embedded in their structures that you can't really take them out. And so I'd say that's the main place where the abilities come into play, is the sense that people know about the Yakuza, but they don't know the details. People know about abilities, they don't know the details.
So abilities are, again, a never open secret, essentially, but one that is kind of, if you don't have it, then you don't really know.
Yeah, and if you're not seeking out information, you don't know about it. And it's certainly something wherein we see in canon where they're very kind of flippant with their use of abilities in public. That's not the case in this story.
Yeah, I still don't understand the canon narrative of no one knows what ability users really exist, but also take a look at this big ass tiger, y'all. He's just chilling. Look at Kenji. He's just smacking shit around.
Yeah, it is very amusing where they're like, oh, there's like this, there's abilities, and they say that there's like a whole agency around them, but nobody knows. And then the agency is like destroying shit every other week.
And also in a very public building. It's like no one goes to this agency thinking that they're normal detectives.
Right.
It's just so funny to me. All I can think of is every time Kenji goes out and does his thing, it's like, do people just think that this is how 14-year-olds act? Like, are people just like, oh yeah, this is very, very normal puberty?
I doubt it.
This kid's just going for puberty. It's fine. They all do that. When they start turning 14, their voices start cracking, they start getting really, really moody, and also they start tossing cars around. That's just how teenagers work.
Okay. And then let me see in terms of any other questions. I'm curious to hear if you have any thoughts yet on our mystery organization.
I have several thoughts. And part of it is knowing how you were pulling from, saying that you were pulling basically characters from canon to suit the placements and less thinking about where canon connections are. And so my thoughts are that it's probably not F. Scott Fitzgerald. If it's F. Scott Fitzgerald, I'll eat my words and maybe my Chuya hat over there, but I shouldn't make that promise. F. Scott Fitzgerald has gotten me into enough trouble in my lifetime. But I am kind of pulling for a bit of an overseas presence. I know it's not Fyodor. I pretty much know you're doing the straight face thing. If you're just listening to this, Dessa has the best poker face I've ever seen on a human being. She has this uncanny way of just looking me like dead in the eye and just going, I can't get anything. Like, I don't think it's Fyodor. I really don't think it's Fitzy. It might be, though. I mean, Luis is here. Who else? Gosh. You're just gonna pull a fast one on me and turn around and it's gonna be like, it's Natsume Soseki. The Cat Mafia is here. Cat Mafia is here, they're taking over, and no one can do anything. That's my prediction. It's my prediction for who the mystery organization is. It's
the
not
Cat Mafia.
Yes, it's Natsume Soseki and his incredible Cat Mafia. I encountered them in Japan, okay? The shrine cats, they all just kind of come at you in droves. You're just flocked. You're like, yeah, this is the Nyafia is getting me.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Yeah, then I guess my only other question would be, is there a single character at this point that you're pulling for the most?
Yeah, Chuya. I love Chuya just in general. I love Chuya in canon. I love Chuya in a lot of fan interpretations. It's hard for me not to feel for the little dude, and it's even harder for me not to feel for the little dude when he's in the circumstances he's currently in, and also when his new husband won't stop calling him Chibi. I'm pulling for him getting, first of all, a happy ending, and second of all, at least one good smack in on Dazai.
Yeah.
Or maybe Dazai just being very, very lovely to him. Like, maybe this is just going to turn out to be a good, domestic, fluffy I can't believe I thought. I can't finish that one. But yeah, I'm pulling hard for Chuya. I love him. I think that he is very, very interesting, and I very much like to see characters kind of out of their element, doing a fish out of water thing, kind of in a bad position, and seeing how they pull out of it. And especially with what we've established with both Chi's competency, but also his temper, and the fact that there's some twistiness around him. I'm just pulling for a little dude. I just hope Chibi has a good day.
Yeah, I think that's what most people are hoping for.
Were you hoping that I would say something horrible, like going, I hope Mori does great in this story?
No, I'm just mostly curious, because when you're writing a story like this, obviously you get comments as people are reading it, and so I was getting comments in terms of people going like, oh, this is interesting, or oh, I'm curious. This chapter was one of the ones that I posted while the story was still anonymous. And so I'm going to say it was around this chapter that people started trying to figure out who was writing this story. It was like, I want to say there were a couple people who guessed it was me very early on. And then they were just like guessing as each updates. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 months before I was finally like, okay, I can't pretend it's not me anymore because everyone's just decided I'm writing this story. So yeah, it's just curiosity. So, but the reason I mentioned it was written anonymously was because I did not get as many comments as I did when it was like, yes, I am writing this story. So I didn't really know super well how people were reacting to the story at this point.
Oh. In that case, this is going to be real interesting for both of us because I'm very vocal about it.
Yeah, and well, I mean, most people don't get to sit down and grill me with questions after they read a chapter.
Exactly. It's, so for everyone listening, the way that we do this is generally I read the chapter about like 30 minutes to like maybe an hour before we do this, so it's really fresh in my mind. So that's why I'm just rapid firing questions at Dessa.
On the other hand, I do not read the chapter before we go in, but I had to write it, so I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's actually really impressive that you're remembering like this much detail.
Yeah. Well, because I wrote the story, of course, and because it was such an intricate plot, it was one where I had to keep going back in my notes and verifying that I was like following through lines and that sort of thing. But also, as I've mentioned a couple times this episode, I did an author's commentary on it where I read the fic from beginning to end, and that's the first time I've ever like just sat down and read one of my chapter fics. Because like you write it, you're like, I know what's coming next. I don't need to read every chapter. Like I know what happens. But I had to read it in terms of giving commentary, and I was taking a lot of notes as well as, so it was like, this line's important, this line's important. So that's why when you were mentioning passages, I was like, oh, I remember highlighting that, or oh, I remember saying something in the commentary about that.
Interesting.
And Ree cannot look at the commentary because it's not spoiler free.
Yeah, I'm reading this like all of you are. In the first 2 chapters were PDF form. The third I just went on AO3.
Oh.
I couldn't find the PDF.
I was like, I sent you the whole PDF.
You didn't, but I only opened it on my phone. So
Okay. Well, with that being said, I'm very excited to see what you pick up from chapter 4. I have to go back and double check my notes, but I do think I'm just gonna have you read only chapter 4 for the next chapter, unless it ends on a particular cliffhanger in which I will have you also read chapter 5. But if you are watching this on YouTube, this is also being posted on AO3 as well as the audio. If you have any questions over at least chapter 4, go ahead and send them in to us either on my Curious Cat, on the AO3 page, or the AO3 page for the podcast, not for Where Your Loyalties Lie, because that could get confusing. And then on the YouTube channel, I will be looking at those comments and pulling them. Ree will not be looking at the comments in case there's anything spoilery in them. So also do not send your questions directly to Ree in case they are spoiler.
Not that there's any way to really reach me anonymously or with questions.
But yeah, so with that in mind, we are once again going to be filming these once a week. So if you get your questions in before next Wednesday, they can make it into the podcast. But with that said, do you have anything else to add?
God, I hope Luisa's having a nice day.
She is having a nice day. I can confirm that.
I'm going to ask this every episode. Is Luisa Mayalka having a great day?
Okay, and I will have an answer every episode for whether or not she's having a great day.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for joining me in experiencing this fic for the first time. I don't know how I've been in the Bunker Stray Dogs fandom for as long as I have and have not read this, but yeah, thank you so much. We super appreciate it, and we are just really, really thrilled to be doing this podcast.
It's a lot of fun. So we're excited to get through the rest of the story, and bring you another episode next week. Bye.
See yas.
As I get crazy, walk through crazy.
Chris.
I thought about it. I was like, I should close this closer to the chair so she can't get in. Cool. I didn't think she would actually do it.
I didn't either, especially not when there's living room company for her.
How are we doing on time? 11:28. No.
That's my feet alarm. But we're not gonna do that right now.